Okay, what's going on? We're going to do Henry Salt. And that's just like it sounds, Henry Salt. He was an eminent English traveler, and this is from Antiquity Unveiled on page 104. And here is the spirit testimony of Henry Salt. Good day, sir. There is no antiquarian, no inscriptionist, no linguist, but absolutely understands that all historic religions, either through relics, monuments, or scrolls, have their origin in the sun, and that all the ancients, all through their religions, although their religions may be diversified, started on that central pivot, the sun. And after a most laborious effort to come here today, and through an uneducated man to state what I know, I find it most difficult, as you mortals cannot and will not know until you become spirits, to carry out my purpose. We will commence with this, what has been said being only preliminary, abrasax, Abrasax, you will find that this word, wherever written or carved, is claimed to have been derived from the Hebrew aben, and has been said to designate what might be termed in Hebrew father. But in no case can the learned claim that this is true, for in reality it relates to the Persian god Mithras, Mithras, and Abraxas, Abraxas, or Abrasax, Abrasax, means the amulet worn by the ancients, and in all cases is traced to Mithras as typical of the sun. I will next refer to G. Bellinzoni's great discovery at Thebes, where basso-relievos cover the sides of a tomb that no antiquarian can claim to understand in any other light than astronomical. Also in the works of Edward Ruppel and his discoveries in Egypt, Nubia, Kordofan, it will be found that all temple inscriptions and tombs are, in every case, either built according to the ancient system of astrology, or they are so sculpted, outside and in, as to render their astrological relations apparent. The first thing that strikes the attention of an antiquarian are certain symbols, always known as representing the sun, or the center of the solar system. You will also find in the writings of Bellinzoni concerning the oasis of Jupiter Ammon, that the whole ancient system is a combination of the sun with the first sign of the zodiac, or with the Aries, the ram, or the lamb. The same kinds of basso-relievos, only under a ruder character, are found in the bases of the temples of India, among the principal of which are the caves of Ellora or Elephanta, and that this principle is just as much observed today in these ancient countries, I am prepared to prove by the temples of Shumado, Shoemadoo, near Pegu, Pegu, in Burma, called in English the Golden Supreme, also by the temple near Rangoon of the Shu Dagon or Golden Dagon. These temples are built upon exact astronomical principles. This last modern Dagon throws a full light upon the nature of the temple of the Philistines, spoken of in the Hebrew text, where Dagon fell down before the ark. No learned commentator can deny the identity of the modern Dagon with the Ancient One. And now, for my final effort through this man, to show where, from inscriptions and ruins still existing, I think it will be found that true civilization began. And to do this, I shall have to go back before real history begins and show that man, having left his rude home upon the Asiatic plains, that's Asiatic plains beyond the Himalayas, made his descent into the fertile plains of India, with all his rude barbarian health not yet enervated by luxury. There, finding the soil to yield him the necessities of life without labor, and everything that goes to make up material happiness, he naturally became mentally developed. And in those regions, I think, between 12,000 and 15,000 years ago, was invented and introduced what is termed by the learned the Sanskrit tongue, the language of the real sun worship, and which has governed every system of religion since. If there is any religion without the symbol of the sun in Aries, or in the first sign of the zodiac, I have failed to discover it. All kinds of life that have taken on form have been worshipped simply as types or waymarks to the great material god, the sun. In writing, they almost always, or as nearly as possible, wrote from east to west. It is a well-known fact that all the early Christians worshipped or manifested their adoration by bowing towards the east, the counterpart of pagan sun worship. And in Palmyra and Thebes, the principal object worshipped by the forerunners of Christianity was Ares, the ram or the lamb. And the Therapeutae, Therapeutae, also worshipped the same symbol. You will find this proven in Sir William Jones' Asiatic Researches. I am sorry, as a spirit, that I allowed Christianity to blind my eyes to the truth. As I did so, I owe it to my mortal brethren here on earth to set them right. If this succeeds in doing what I intend it shall, parentheses, and I have no doubt it will if properly followed up, end of parentheses, I will have done my part towards retrieving my mistake. And now I have this to say to you, that whilst I leave you to withstand the concussion of error, I, as a spirit, will always be with you in what I have here uttered. Yours for the public good, Henry Salt. All right, and we're going to refer to Biographie Universelle for an account of Henry Salt. Such a man was Henry Salt, whose spirit, after half a century, returns to inform the world as to certain points of ancient history which his Christian prejudices prevented him from acknowledging when he was in mortal form. Reader, think of what the world has been deprived of through the Christian training of this truly learned and accomplished antiquarian. If Henry Salt had, in 1809, when the result of his investigations into antiquities of Hindustan and Abyssinia and Egypt was first published, then asserted what he now positively asserts, to wit, that all religions had their origins in the sun, from which they all started as one pivotal point, it would not be necessary for me to draw down upon myself the opposition and anonymity of religious bigots in laying bare the truth in relation to those time-honored delusions called Christian truths. That he should have found it most difficult to use the medium as well as he did, I can well understand, although he thinks that cannot be possible. I have not a doubt of the correctness of his interpretation of Abrakas or Abrasax, which has been so clearly misunderstood. It is undoubtedly a Persian and not a Grecian symbol, as has been erroneously supposed, and no doubt had relation to the sun in its annual revolution. And for the account of Wilhelm Rupel and Bellinzoni, we refer to Thomas's dictionary biography. The spirit of salt no doubt recalls what he was perfectly familiar with in his earth life. When he speaks of the astro-theological discoveries of Bellinzoni and Rupel, he must have been personally acquainted with both, and they no doubt concurred in opinions as to the astro-theological origin and character of Christianity. No well-informed antiquarian will question the assertion of this spirit, that the temples of India and Egypt corresponded as to their respective symbols and the signification of them, that the Burman Dagon of modern times is identical with the fish god of the Philistines. There is no doubt they represent alike the sun in the sign of the fishes, and because of the fact the former is called the golden Dagon, everything being considered golden that expressed the solar light. But here we have a spirit of one of the most learned men of the beginning of the present century, in the light of his mortal and spirit knowledge, asserting that the first written language was Sanskrit, and that it had its origin between 12,000 and 15,000 years ago, in the elevated plains of southern and central Asia, among a people themselves fresh from a barbaric state. And what is most significant of all, that the language was invented to express the worship of the sun by that rude and early people. Even at that early period, the sun, in the sign of Aries, was a leading feature of the religion of the primitive Aryan people. It was on account of the fact of the sun's apparent movement from east to west, says the Spirit of Salt, that the Asiatic peoples usually wrote from right to left instead of from left to right, as we do. It is equally certain that the Essenes, who were the primitive Christians, worshipped the sun, and always bowed or knelt towards the east in the adoration of the sun. It is equally certain that the principal object of worship of the Palmyrans and the Thebans, who were the people from whom the Christians derived the religion in great part, was the sun, in the sign of the Lamb. This spirit frankly confesses that he allowed himself to be blinded by Christianity, and comes to us, he says, to make amends so far as he may for his error, by disclosing what he could of the truth. Reader, could you know the labor of testing the truth of these communications, you would regard them as more precious than gold, as sources of the most reliable knowledge as to the affairs of the past. And so that's going to finish up Spirit Testimony of Henry Salt. And that was page 104 to 108.